Here we go. Does that include penny farthings? Get on Google. Come on.
That's what I'm about to do. But David, I might give you a prize because that's a very good technicality you got me on there.
Surely it has to. That's a bicycle.
Everyone's now on Google.
Okay. We are into the exciting meat of Safe System Assessment course because I'm just going to tell you how to do the mechanics of an assessment. Now you're very comfortable with the idea of the Safe System philosophy. You're really becoming experts in categorization of what is influencing exposure, likelihood, severity. You're looking at areas through that safe system lens. And so now we just got to, do this for a design or an existing bit of road and report it in a way that conforms with sort of the general practice. So let's have a look and jump into it. We've already hit the record button. Okay, at the end of this module, so we're going to actually point you at some guidance that sits under the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework for some further assistance. You're going to be able to complete the Safe System Assessment Matrix. And that's the really meaty part of a Safe System Assessment usually. You're going to learn to write up a report, what you would expect to see in a report. And one thing we haven't done a lot of, or we haven't really talked about, is categorizing our ideas and our treatments into primary and supporting. So I do want to take a little bit of time to explain that and point at a few things. So in the background, Kathy's going to open up the Safe System Assessment Framework and point you at some really helpful resources in categorizing into primary and supporting. Don't forget to count your wallies, of course. So we've done the safe system. We're comfortable with the principles of the safe system, the elements, the philosophy that it is. We took these principles and human vulnerability, people making mistakes, shared responsibility, no death and serious injury as an aspiration. We packed all of that in, and we now need to move forward and really get into this practical assessment technique. And it's really based around this formula. So the formula being how many people are exposed to this crash? What is the chance of said crash based on a relative assessment of the likelihood? And how bad is it going to be when it happens? And we want to quantify these. We actually want to put numbers to these and get scores out of it. So we could actually, I was going to drift off into some nuances of language and physics, but I won't do that. Okay, so we are going to need to come back to these biomechanics of injury curves that we talked about. Max took you through those. I've referred to them again. Really important. Why are they really important? Well, they're really important because we need to use them to get to this number to quantify severity. And I've put them at the start of this module slides again. I've put in these extra tables which have some other angles. So, a little bit more of an angle on a crash and you get better. Side impact with poles or trees, thinking about pedestrians and cyclists as well. So you've got some data around that one. So they're all there at the front of today's slide pack module. And when you get into the doing your safe system assessment, you'll likely be referring back to those. Okay, I'm going to get into it. And I am hoping we might have a little bit of time at the end of this session for you to get started on your safe system assessment within the 2 hours we have. I will give you your break though, but we'll see how we go. Quiz time. Well, poll time, really. It shouldn't say quiz time. This one's just a poll to see what is your experience with safe system assessments? So what has been your involvement with safe system assessments? So hopefully that's popped up on your screen now, and it goes from nothing, safe system what now, to heard the term, don't know much more, all the way up to I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. So just interested, I'm interested in this and how much people have in terms of involvement and experience and background, but also it'll help me just tailor how much time I go into some bits and pieces of the content. So I'll give you a second to do that. I'm seeing lots of answers come in already.
Where would you put yourself, Ken? Have you done one?
I have done one.
One or two? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't tried to count for a while. But a year or two ago, I'd done about 150. So
lovely. All right, that's everyone in. Thank you. That's 100% results. So here we go.
Yeah. Okay. So nice sort of little bell curve going on there. Most people heard the term, don't know much more, and that's fine. Got a safe system, what now? And a couple have had them done on their projects. Okay, good. Let's get rid of that. And that helps me. Okay. So Austroads has this document available. And like any Austroads publication, it is free, and it is the Safe System Assessment Framework. So it does document, how do you do these safe system assessments? It doesn't go into detail in some areas that we've discovered are required in the practical doing of safe system assessments. But the document is sort of chunked up into those colored little bits where we look at, well, what is the objective of this assessment that we're doing? What's the context of the project that's being assessed, assuming you're looking at a design or something that's some changes that are going to be happening? Could be just, what's the existing road network? And then the safe system assessment matrix, exposure, likelihood, severity, and possibly other elements or other pillars of the safe system. Treatment hierarchy then is like, what changes could be made? How can we adjust things, make this project better or make this bit of the road network better? So we'll put that into the learning management system. So you'll have a copy of that you can easily get from there. Of course, you can get it from the Austroads website if you sign up and get yourself a login. 2 jurisdictions have come out with supplementary guidance, and we could call them supplements or the like, but that's Victoria and South Australia. So both jurisdictions identified that the Austroads guide is missing some things. A couple of things in the Austroads guide they don't agree with for one reason or another. Practically, it doesn't play out well. When the Austroads guide was developed, there was very few safe system assessments that had ever been done. They were kind of fumbling along in the dark, and they put some things down, and it's been discovered that in reality they don't work out quite the way it had been envisaged. And so yeah, these 2 jurisdictions have done that. This has sort of become common practice across Queensland, New South Wales, New Zealand, Tasmania, Northern Territory as well. Western Australia just doesn't really do any of this. They've got a different thing going on over there. These 2 documents are pretty much identical, apart from one, every time it says Victoria, says South Australia, and that's really about it. Different logos. So we've got some general consistency in industry and how these are done. Now, what I'm going to do is start right at the output, the thing that a lot of people expect to see when they receive a safe system assessment, or one of the key things they're looking for. And it looks something like this. And I'm going to start right down here at showing you the, and then I'm going to show you how to build this and get to this stage. But what we see here is some sort of scenario where we have an existing intersection and 3 designs. And the designs were, one was to, create a roundabout. You haven't seen the designs yet. One is to make it signalized and with a modified T intersection. So that's the diagram there. And one signalize it with a conventional T intersection. So what you can see here is that the red bars here are the existing conditions, what is currently out there. And then the orange is the design of the roundabout. The blue is the design of the modified T signals. The gray is the design of the conventional T signals. And up here we have safe system alignment score. And each of these groupings are a crash type: runoff road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcycles. Now, the lower the score, the better. The lower the score, the better. Okay, better alignment with safe system principles, lower scores. So what we can see without knowing, anything about this, just from this output, I can say, right, it looks like a roundabout performs pretty well in most categories, except for things that are not going to improve for cyclists if the roundabout option is selected. And, get some info from the others on bits and pieces. So, you gather intel immediately from that. So what we want to do is teach you to get to this point. Now, I do a fair bit of talking in this session, so I do encourage questions as we go. The first thing you do as a safe system assessor is when you've been engaged and you've got a team together, and you send your client some questions, or you organize a workshop where you get in the same room and you ask these questions. Austroads actually came out with prompt questions. These are directly out of the Austroads guide, these questions, and they're a good starting point. What's the reason for the project? And then there's some additional supplementary questions around that. What's the function of the road? What's the speed environment? What road users are present? What's the vehicle composition? And these are just prompt questions. You could ask a lot more questions. The purpose of this is to really get a good feel for what's the project that they're trying to do, why are they doing it, what's the environment, have they made any commitments, political or otherwise. It's a real context gathering exercise, which helps you out in the assessing, but also in making good recommendations. So the safe system matrix, a safe system assessment matrix, you can see here. Okay, so and a matrix just being, a fancy name for a table, essentially, isn't it? You can see here that we've got the same crash types that I mentioned: runoff road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcycles. Then we've got 3 rows: exposure, likelihood, and severity. Hallelujah. That's why we were banging on about it so much, because you need to categorize in order to do the assessment. Now, let's go back to these crashes. A runoff road crash is where a vehicle leaves the road and either strikes something or rolls over and doesn't, get back on the road and keep driving off. Head-on crash is passenger vehicles or other vehicles hitting each other head-on, and they're going essentially straight through. They're not making a distinct turn movement at an intersection. Intersection crashes are vehicles colliding at an intersection, either going perpendicular or making particular turn movements. These three categories, okay, are vehicles being cars or trucks. Because if at an intersection, a vehicle goes through the intersection and hits a pedestrian, we categorize that as a pedestrian crash in the Safe System Assessment Program. Even though it happened in the space of an intersection, we're putting it and we're thinking about that risk as a pedestrian crash risk. Cyclists, is turning in an intersection or the like, in our mind, we're thinking about that as cyclist risk, and same with motorcyclists. So anybody who does any crash reporting or has done black spot projects, crash reduction studies, or the like, you'll be sort of okay with this, because it's similar to how we do the coding of crashes. So in New South Wales, you'd call them RUM codes, road user movement codes. In Queensland, you'd call them DCA codes, definition of classifying accidents, as Victoria would. I forget what New Zealand calls them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So those are the categorizations we'd use. So cyclist crash, pedestrian crash. Now, because these categories, they can include all sorts of permutations of scenarios, but we're just thinking about who's the end road user that's going to be injured or killed, and we categorize it according to that. There's other. That is there to handle anything that has not been accurately picked up in those other crash types. Now, common things that could be in the other category are crashes with animals, railway level crossing crashes, sideswipe crashes, rear end crashes, but only if it's been facilitated by a mid-block location. So if it's an end of queue issue from an intersection, so vehicles queuing back from an intersection, and you're worried about the risk of a rear end crash at that actually gets accounted for in intersections as part of a safe system assessment. That was a fair bit of industry debate around how that should be categorized. It's ended up industry practice that's put into intersection, and the other would be if it's a pedestrian crossing, mid-block, a school crossing, maybe, emerging from a driveway, or these sorts of things. So they're the crashes. Think about them in those categorizations, and hopefully that, that's reasonably clear for you. Okay. So what I want to do now is go to each of these rows. Exposure. So let's start with exposure. So we're saying how many vehicles are exposed to runoff road crashes? And your thing is going to be the AADT, the annual average daily traffic. How many vehicles are using the road? That's how many are exposed to runoff road crashes. So you could have an area, I don't know, let's say we've got a road and it's got 4,000 vehicles a day. Oh. Got 4,000 vehicles a day, okay? That's how many are exposed to runoff road crashes. Interestingly, that's also how many are exposed to head-on crashes, because it's the same number of vehicles, it's the same road. Intersections are an interesting one. Because what we do is, if appropriate, and you can look at your traffic figures, you add the AADTs of the approaches. So we had a crossroad, for example, and we had 4,000 on one, and we had 2,000 on the other. So we've got 4,000 on the one we're looking at. We've got this crossroad that's got 2,000. We're going to put 6,000 in here. Okay. So these are not the actual numbers we use, though, but they're the AADTs. They're giving us the information. What we need to do is go to our scoring reference sheet. And our scoring reference sheet is out of Austroads. And Austroads has put a score that you can use in your matrix of a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. That's it, 0 to 4. And you can see here we've got a score for exposure, likelihood, severity, and a definition of how we get there. So let's look at what a 1 would be for exposure. Volume of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are particularly low. Therefore, exposure is low. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is less than 1,000 vehicles a day. For cyclists, pedestrians, motorcycle crash types, volumes are less than 10 units per day. Okay, so we've established that we've got 4,000 vehicles a day. So it doesn't fit into this category. Let's jump up a category. Let's see what a 2 is. Okay, vehicles involved in a particular crash type are moderate. Exposure is moderate. Hang on, 1,000 to 5,000. Okay, that's looking like where we're sitting for our AADT. For cyclists and pedestrians, 10 to 50. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to, I've made a mess of this slide already, haven't I? I'm going to clear everything off it. We're going to put a 2 in here. I'm going to put a 2 in here. And I'm going to put a 2 in here as well in the other, because I'm thinking about, and crashes with animals or side side crashes or crashes with level crossings, whatever it is based on the AADT, the number of vehicles that are exposed to that. What about intersections? We said there were 4,000, but then the crossroad has 2,000. So where does that go? Well, it's not a 2 because it's above that. So, okay, what do we got here? A 3. A 3 is 5,000 to 10,000. So that looks good. So let's take that 3 and we'll pop the 3 in there. Now, we've got pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. There's one's pedestrian numbers, cyclist numbers, motorcycle numbers. Now, you might be given those, or they might say to you, we don't know. We haven't done pedestrian counts. We haven't done cyclist counts. We haven't done motorcyclist counts. So this is where you may need to use your judgment. What I find is almost all the time, there's some sort of traffic volumes, AADTs, that I can gather. Very rarely do I get pedestrian counts, cyclist counts. And motorcyclist counts, well, sometimes the traffic counters have been able to pick up motorcyclists and you can get an idea of that. But you will have to make a judgment on this. And your judgment can be back. Oh, sorry, that wasn't an extra volley, by the way. That was me pressing the wrong slide. Where this in the diagram says, low, particularly low, right? Now you do have some guidance here, less than 10 units a day. This one here talks about moderate exposure, high exposure, very high exposure to crashes. So you can use those as a bit of a guide to help you. You've got some indication in terms of pedestrians that are crossing or cyclists that are going through the intersection per day. And you're going to have to make a judgment call on it. So, you know, maybe this is a very rural road environment. It's got an intersection there. And I'm going to say, well, you know, there's a few people that maybe walk their dog through the area. And that's about all, really. I can see it's pretty much farmland all around. I'm going to give it a 1. You know, and cyclists, well, no, I don't think I really ever see a cyclist. Maybe there's the occasional, recreational cyclist goes through the area, the occasional tourist on a bike and these sort of things, but it's not a commuter route. It's not these sort of things. But am I comfortable saying absolutely none ever? No, I'm going to give it a 1. And then motorcyclists, well, hard to say. I use a bit of a rule of thumb, either 1% or 2% of AADT, which is a pretty decent, you know, contribution of motorcycles, or expected contribution of motorcyclists in the fleet for not a particularly popular motorcycle route, just a general bit of the network. So, you know, maybe we'll go that. So we end up with a 2 or something for that. Okay, so we've put numbers in for exposure, and Kathy, I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
There are some questions. So could you put a high AADT of trucks in the other column?
Yeah, so you could, if you really want to, and there some people do this. They make their other column into heavy vehicles. Okay, that is an option. Okay, what other people do often is a high percentage of heavy vehicles is used, and we'll get down to this, as a severity factor. So if an incident occurs, there's a bit more chance it's going to be more severe because there's a higher percentage of heavy vehicles. So there's more chance that the heavy vehicles will be involved. They've got more mass. They do more damage. Both are legitimate ways of doing it. And there's a few things within safe system assessing that you'll discover where you have a little bit of flexibility in exactly how you do it. And the fact that you always do a relative assessment against the existing conditions means that this is kind of okay. Because you're always saying, what is there now? And how are we going to change it? Are we going to make it better? Are we going to make it worse? And so as long as you're consistent across your assessment, like the existing conditions was done this way, then we assessed the designs, however many they are. That consistency means that it actually doesn't particularly matter if you allocate other to heavy vehicles or you plonk it into the severity.
Right. Okay, good. So more questions around this. What about buses, public transport, for example, bus stops? Does this get considered in the matrix?
Yep. So if you're particularly interested in the people alighting the bus, that is factored into pedestrians. So if they're getting off the bus and being struck or the like, that's in pedestrians, or if the bus is running over people that are getting, trying to cross after they get off the bus, it's factored into pedestrians there. Okay. If you're worried about vehicles hitting each other because the bus is there, so they have to get out of their lane and sideswipe crashes with other vehicles, you put that into the other. If you're thinking about people rear-ending the bus itself, that's in the other as well. And you just do a little bit of clarifying of this in the other here, just to say these are the crashes that we're thinking about.
Okay. How are these different tiers for AADT determined? What is the significance of these values?
Yeah. There's an old saying in politics is, politics and policy making is you don't want to see how the sausage is made, right? And it kind of applies here because this the determination of those was a handful of people just using their judgment on it at the time. And it was, you know, a handful of, it was like your Bruce Corbyn, Chris Urovich, Blair Turner, Jeremy Woolley, Chris Stokes, you know, these people who are, you know, immersed in sort of road safety engineering and do a lot of that research and studies around it. And that's what they came up with. I'll tell you now that it's probably one of the things that most people who are really into safe system assessing go, yeah, these numbers spit out some weird things sometimes. But again, the numbers are really helpful for us, but you shouldn't fixate on the numbers. You should fixate on this as a risk rating. And I'll explain that a bit more as we get later down the track, but it is a really good question. Like, you know, give us some, you know, really comprehensive empirical research and evidence around those numbers. Well, I can't do that.
All right, sorry, Ken, I've taken over here for the next question, which is for dual carriageway, is each carriageway scored separately for the AADT?
No. You do it as one. Well, the only way you do that differently is if you did multiple assessments. So you assessed carriageway 1 as its own assessment, and you assessed carriageway 2 as its own assessment, but mostly you add them and you do a dual direction, dual carriageway AADT.
Okay, great.
Oh, and 10,000 vehicles a day is not a lot in a lot of cities. Like, if 10,000, no worries. So you get a lot of falls in exposure for vehicles.
Mm-hmm. The reason I just brought this up is because there is some additional support via the fact sheet, and there they are there. Okay, next question. Are there guideline notes on estimating those numbers anywhere for pedestrian, cyclists and motorbikes, i.e. the 1-2% for motorbikes? Is there anything on that?
There, in the Austroads guide, there's a little hint to that 1%, 1 to 2% for motorcyclists. There is nothing for, well, there's the actual numbers for pedestrians and cyclists and the like. So you could kind of count if you wanted to hang out there all day. But as I mentioned, as long as you have in your mind a bit of clarity around what you've based your baseline assessment on, your existing conditions assessment on, as long as you use that consistently throughout, you're getting a nice relative picture of risk against the baseline, the existing conditions.
Okay. What about for tunnels or where there is no possibility of cross carriageway?
Yeah. So what a wonderful question. I'm going to steal the screen back now, Kathy.
Fair enough. Am I going to give Richard a prize for a good question?
Sure.
Okay. There's more questions to come too. Great questions. I can see everyone's minds ticking over.
Well, that's good. Let me deal with that one and then we'll go and we'll answer some more.
Yeah.
The one I skipped over here was a 0, wasn't it? Skipped over a 0 completely. There is no exposure to a certain crash type. This might mean that there is no side flow, no intersecting roads, no cyclists, pedestrians, no motorcyclists. So if you were in a tunnel and that was your assessment, you would simply go, we get a 0. You've got no intersections. There's no intersection risk. Okay. You're going to put a 0 there. Well, there's no intersection exposure. I'll talk about how that all plays out. But I think some people are already jumping ahead in their mind and realizing that we're going to multiply these. And so you multiply anything by a 0 and it comes out a 0. So that is actually why the 0 was included in the scoring matrix. So you could absolutely eliminate risk by utilizing a multiplication by 0. Great question. But I'm going to put that back to whatever I had it at. What did I have it at? 3.
I thought it was 2.
Nah, because it was an addition of the two flows.
Oh, okay.
Keep up, Kathy. Keep up.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm keeping up with the questions.
You're doing
Okay.
well. Keep doing well.
Now, so we've moved on. We're moving on to some more higher level questions.
Yeah.
Calm down on the number of wombats. Is there a tendency for someone to add up the numbers for each category and then the lowest score wins?
So not for each category. What we're seeing is I was on the working group for the Austrade's Guide. I wasn't one of the authors, as I mentioned the authors, but I was on a working group, so I was in some of the workshops, and I was just like, are we really going to put numbers to a risk assessment methodology and hand this to technical people? They're going to run this off a cliff. And sure enough, we started seeing that, early on, people were putting multiple decimal places to these numbers. Like, we had N scores, and we'll get to, multiplying them out and getting N scores, but they were like 5 decimal place scores. And that's just, when you look at it, ridiculous, because we're making fairly broad brush risk assessment assumptions here. This should be considered really no different to high, medium, low risk. What's the exposure? Is it high, medium, low, or absolutely none at all because there's nothing there? That's the kind of thing. So that's the decimal point one. The second one was that people would lose sight of the purpose of doing this. And they would just go, how do we get a score 1 point below the existing number? All right. And then we're ticking a box that we're improving things, and that's it. And we see this happening often, major projects with other transport objectives, be it congestion easing or the like, and they come up with a design and they get a score, and the score's higher than the existing conditions, which means they're going against safe system principles, they're making things worse. And they go, oh, okay, can we, and then they start trying to finesse little tiny bits and pieces to bring that number just 1 point under. Doesn't matter that their existing conditions had a really bad score, and then all they're doing is making it, just as bad, but a tiny little bit less, which is ridiculous in the sense that we're in a broad brush categorization anyway. So like a score of 275 to 274, there's no difference. I mean, there could be, but it's just too, there's too much margin of error in that for any of that. So yes, there is a danger of that, but there is some advantage to it as well. And some of the advantage to it is that putting down a graph with numbers holds a lot more credibility than an opinion-based risk assessment. It's just the way humans react and look at stuff. A juicy report with numbers and graphs, more clout than, and I've seen it play out all the time. I used to do a lot of sort of even road safety audits or just safety assessment reports, and I put it down, and they just go, oh, I don't think the risk's that bad. I think it'll be okay. Yeah, no, that's people running red lights, and and it's kind of almost dismiss it to a degree. I mean, they don't completely, but when the graph is there and the numbers are there, it's like, okay, well, we need to get these numbers down. Like their purpose is to get the numbers down, not to argue with your assessment. So that's pretty exciting.
Lovely. I think I saw a thumbs up for that one, Ken. So that's good. Okay. Next question is, how does a roundabout, so this is going back a bit earlier when you were showing us the outputs. How does a roundabout be as safe for pedestrians as a TCS? Is that a typical cross section? No.
Traffic signal.
Traffic controlled signals?
Yeah. So yeah,
One or the other.
So sorry, can you repeat?
How does a roundabout be as safe for pedestrians?
Oh, in the actual example one. Okay, that'll be
I
back
think
to the
so.
graph. So
Yeah.
you have to take all of this in context and a grain of salt. The there's actually pretty good evidence that a roundabout is about as safe as a set of traffic signals in some contexts for pedestrians due to speed reduction. Don't get me wrong, pedestrians hate it and they don't go to cross there, but you just from a pure death and serious injury perspective, there's some good evidence to show the safety implications. So yeah, but don't take that one just as an example, because you really need to know the context of these before you can, yeah. So anyway, that's the answer to that.
Okay. All right. And last one before we move on to the next bit. Does this safe system assessment take over from the network risk assessment within Austroads?
Oh, what a good question. And I throw a question back at you. Which network risk assessment are you talking about?
Because good.
There's multiple ones that Austroads have, but I'll talk to a few of them. So
all right, so prize if you can name all the network risk assessments. Go.
No, I don't even think I would be able to get that prize, Kathy. They're intertwined and embedded. In fact, I ran a whole day of training for the ACT government on different techniques to assess road safety. And, in a whole day of talking about this, hardly scratched the surface of the amounts of ways you can do it. Okay, so Austroads has a few things. There are network safety plans, which is actually integrated into the National Road Safety Strategy, which is where you would go out and come up with investment scenarios for your road network. And, within that, you take some very basic metrics of risk, and you are able to look at cross sections of the road and get a feel for it. It is a high-level strategic allocation or a strategic insight into risk on your road network and investment scenarios. It's big picture, it's macro. You do it for your whole network, right? So that one, which is one of the risk tools, network risk tools that Austroads have, no, very different. This safe system assessment matrix is much more honed in. The next one is the Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 6. Guide to Road Design Part 6, not the Guide to Road Safety Part 6, which is Road Safety Audit. Guide to Road Design Part 6, which is roadside risk barriers and something else. I forget its exact title. It's about roadside risk. And within that, the newest release, the 2022 version, they've come out with this thing called an NRRIT, a Network Roadside Risk Intervention Threshold, and a process for network roadside risk assessment, which has variables in there that look at what is the risk. So what is the chance somebody will leave the road? When they leave the road, what's the severity of object they're going to hit? Okay. Now, what that does is gives you some nice data, really quite decent, I suppose, in terms of based on research and really good stuff on roadside risk in particular. So in theory, that could contribute, if you had a network roadside risk assessment done under that protocol, that could help you with getting some more accuracy and clarity around your runoff road. But that's it, okay? It's not going to help you with the others. So network roadside risk is quite interesting. It's a cool process. It's replaced clear zones. So anybody who's still using clear zones, well, you're behind the times. We've moved on from clear zones. We're into network roadside risk and NRRIT, and the state sets a network roadside risk intervention threshold, a particular number, or the jurisdiction you're in sets a particular number, and that's the score where if you're above it, you got to do something to reduce the risk, be that put a barrier in, lower the speed limit, clear the hazard out, whatever it is. Anyway, that's a whole other training course. In fact, we're packing our bags for Brisbane to run 3 days. Oh no, it's 2 days, isn't it? We've got for Brisbane on roadside design with my colleague Jamie, who's getting into that. Yeah, but as I say, that's a way that you could get some more precision around it. But for a normal safe system assessment, again, that is far more precise than we would probably go. We're into, that scoring is very complex and you get very specific scores. We're going in portions of, 1, 2, 3, or a 4. Like there are segments, right? So if you measure it and it's 1 meter off the road and it's a tree, and then you measure it again and it's 1.5 meters off under the new thing, really the reality of that is the likelihoods maybe come down a little bit, okay, but it's not enough for me to jump at a whole number. The severity stays the same because it's a tree, and if the speed hasn't changed, severity stays the same and the likelihood stays the same, the volume of traffic is the same, it's no difference. Okay, but under an NRRIT or a network roadside risk, you'd be in the precision of that, and it would give you, a little variation in your numbers. Sorry if I went on a bit too long on that.
No, that's okay. I think we're good, and I think we need to move on to likelihood and severity, which will throw out some more interesting questions.
They are good questions.
They're very, 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 very good questions. Lots of thought going into this. Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to have a break, in 10 minutes? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Let's move on to likelihood of crash. And so we've established some numbers in there for the exposure to crash based on our AADT and number of pedestrians, number of cyclists. Now we go to likelihood. Now this group particularly good at likelihood, I decided after reviewing some of your assignments. You're really good at looking at what characteristics of the road environment are increasing the chance that a crash is going to happen here. Speed, geometry, presence of shoulders, delineation, lighting, surface issues, the layout of the intersection, sight distances, crossing distance. These are all things that are going to influence the chance that crash happens. And so for each of those, what you do in your safe system assessment matrix is you actually dot point out all of these things that you believe are altering this chance of crash. So this is where it's more than just writing a number in. You've got to kind of paint the picture. And then after you've done all of that and you've written all these things in, it's bad sight distance to the signals and doesn't have a mast arm, the surface is, poor condition, or, it's, the approach is clear, it's got good sight distance, it's flat, the delineation is great, there's advanced warning signs, it's got lighting, it's got splitter islands, you're saying all these wonderful features. However, the speed's 80 kilometers an hour, so that's high. That means there's more chance of a crash and the like. Now, remember, we've taken into account the traffic volume in the exposure. So we don't include that except for occasionally in things like intersection, where you've got the volume of traffic is the number of people exposed, but it also creates less gaps, and that fact that there's less gaps and less ability to get out increases the chance of crash. So they're rarities. Most of the time you say, no, we've taken into account the number of people that are exposed to this. Now, what's just the inherent infrastructure's propensity to bring forward a crash? And then you've dot pointed all these things out and you go over to the likelihood. You say, okay, let's see what a 1 says for likelihood. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. That's not much They haven't given us much guidance there, have they? Let's go see what they have for a 2. It's unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Still not a huge amount of guidance. It's likely that a given crash type will occur. Okay, here we go with a 4. Here's a few more words. Okay, the likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place. E.g., high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering across several lanes of opposing, several opposing lanes, high speed. Okay, so you've got some characteristics. So what we need you to do is get your head into a relative crash risk perspective. So you are kind of comparing intersections across your jurisdiction, your state, in that not the number of vehicles exposed or how bad the crashes will be, but the infrastructure set up to give all of those clues for a driver or a rider or a walker or whatever it is, that, you know, a crash could happen, and to cross appropriately, or to, you know, be aware of the intersection to give way and the like. So it's a relative assessment. We do have a fact sheet particularly on this, because if you took it at face value, if you did, the likelihood of a crash at a location, it's always highly unlikely, if not less. I mean, these are 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million events. Okay. So you can't do that, and you've got to do it on a relative sense. I hope that makes sense. We sort of save that 4, that score of 4 is really where there's, you know, high speeds, you know, maybe a sharp curve with adverse crossfall, adverse super elevation, or, you know, completely misleading signage and speed and see-through effects, and, you know, the stuff that, you know, road safety auditors just love finding, because you're like, oh, that's definitely going to be causing crashes. So that's kind of your 4 level, and then it goes down from there. So you've dot pointed a whole lot of things out there, and, you know, maybe this road that we're talking about here has sealed shoulders, audio tactile edge line. It's got, you know, a cleared area before any hazards. And, you know, we're really, you know, everything's a straight alignment. And so, you know, we're really down, and we're able to say, well, I'm going to give that a 2, because it's low likelihood. I think that's what it, yeah, it's unlikely. It's unlikely compared to the rest of the road. And maybe head on, well, maybe there's just a center line, and yeah, okay, it's got audio tactile center line, but it's just a white line. I'm going to bump that up to a 3, because, you know, there's no buffer area for the driver if they've been distracted and they've drifted out of their lane and like. Yeah, technically head on you can use AADT as well, because it's a factor. You know, what is the chance that they leave their lane and actually strike another vehicle? Because if it's a completely, you know, very low volume road, it's not, yeah, just that. But anyway, don't get too caught up on that. Intersection, okay, well, maybe this intersection's got all of the works there where, you know, as I talked about, splitter islands, advanced warning, yeah, it's got lighting, all these different things. I want to give it down to a 2. Now, the reason I'm not going a bit lower than that, even though it's all new and shiny and the like, is because, well, people are coming in at 80 kilometers an hour. And you know, if somebody does still make a mistake with, you know, their chance there that an incident occurs. And you go through these, and you know, we might say, well, it's only 1 lane, so sideswipe's not likely, and crashes with animals, you might go, oh, could be there. And you dot point lots of different thoughts out, and like give that a 2. Pedestrians, well, we've said there's next to no pedestrians in the area, but that's been taken into account. So you look at the infrastructure and you say, okay, when a pedestrian is there and they're trying to cross, or they're trying to walk along there, what's their relative likelihood? Now, most of the cases when you have a very low pedestrian volumes, you end up with a very high score here, because logically, why would a road authority invest massively in pedestrian treatments when the area has no pedestrians or next to no pedestrians? Okay. And that, yeah, but you'll see in more complex environments where you get then starting to balance these around. They're safe for cyclists, there won't be cycle facilities and the like. Although the shoulder sometimes, actually, I'm going to take that off. Maybe the shoulder, which wasn't really put there as a particular cycle facility, but it lessened the risk a bit. Motorcyclists, well, I mean, they're going to be subject to a lot of these crashes anyway. So I'm going to put a 3 there. You might even go a 4 because they're having more inherent instability and they're harder to see and all of those things. So 3 or 4 to that. So you can see, as just the way I was sort of talking about it. Now, if you've got a real one and you're looking at an area or a design or like, you can justify it more, but you're still making a judgment call on this, and there's no getting away from that fact. Okay, this is subjective. You make a call, and again, people, because there's numbers, they get a bit freaked out about this. But if I was to say, well, we need to risk rate these: low risk, medium risk, high risk, very high risk. And people would go, oh, no, I don't know, I think it's low risk, I think it's medium risk. And, you come to a consensus, you go, okay, we're happy enough, call it, medium risk or whatever. So think about it that way. Kathy.
Thank you, Ken. Interesting comment that's come through. Just for clarification with using the term high speed in this SSA training, in reference to the Australia's Guide to Road Design Part 3, Geometric Design, it captures 80 kilometres as not high speed. This apparently falls into the moderate speed range, which is 70 to 89. High speed is 90 and up. How is that different here?
Okay, so that, yeah, particular, I suppose, terminology sense. I mean, if I go to the, just quickly do this. If I go to severity of crash, you'll see that most friendly crash, right? As in the crash that we can pretty much handle the most speed out of, at 80 kilometers is sitting somewhere in the either maximum death, like you're going to be killed, or you're very likely to be killed. Okay, so yeah, I think there's other documentation around, and sounds like whoever's put that comment in is very very knowledgeable about the guidelines. But I do recall that anything up to 80 is talked about as, but 80 and is it 80 and 80 and above being high speed? But anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, the point is that the physics of it just dictates that it is high speed. Now we can label it slightly differently in terms of the road environment, but it's high speed.
Okay. Should we take a break, or you want to run through severity? What do you think?
Let's take
a break. Yeah, good call. All right. 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
3.678. 4 minutes. 3.5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've done likelihood. Now we've got scores, and you've written in lots of justification of your score. And we go to severity. And now severity, you can see there are, I should say these dot points that are in here and they're in the Australia. They are just some examples, etc. at the bottom. There is more. You'll find things on site that you want to put in there. When we get into severity, there are kind of less things because we're talking about the physics and the biomechanics of injury. So really speed occurs in all of them because it's, very influential on the severity of outcome. But then there's, are there things to absorb energy like roadside barriers, redirect energy? If you decided to use heavy vehicles in these, is the percentage of heavy vehicles high because they're going to be more severe? Impact angles for intersections. And that might occur in the other crash category as well. So again, you go to your matrix and you go, okay, well, what are we saying for a 1 here? Should a crash occur, it is highly unlikely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are fairly low during a crash, or the majority are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user, meaning a barrier or something to absorb energy like a cushion or a crash attenuator or something like that. And you see it goes up from there. Unlikely to result in fatality or serious injury. Likely to result. Highly likely to result for a 4. But this is where this little chart should help you. And, one of the purposes of developing it was to assist in exactly that. Different crash types, but I do stress you need to judge it yourself, but this should help you along that journey. And is it a 4, a 3, a 2, 1, a 0, or is it somewhere in between those? And you can make a bit of a judgment call. So you're then going to go, okay, so whatever this is, 80 kilometre speed environment, so moderate or high speed or whatever we define it by. People are leaving the road now. They're rolling over, they're hitting hazards. Are there barrier systems? Okay, maybe there's continuous barrier system of some description, or maybe not. If there's trees or power poles or lights, so let's say there's not, and they're going to hit anything at 80 kilometers an hour, that's going to be bad. Head on, okay, 80, well, 80 is, right in that bit where we're going, oh, is it a 3, is it a 4? Maybe you'll be definitely looking at what's the operating speed, 85th percentile, a few other things, you an R, and maybe you go a 3 on that. It's going to be either a 3 or a 4. Intersection, well, it's going to be a 4 because it's right angle. And other, well, if we're thinking about sideswipe crashes, maybe you'd go a 3 or even a 2. I mean, these are going to be our most friendly, but if you're thinking about some other crash types, I don't know, maybe a 3 there. Let's use 4. 80 kilometers an hour, you can pretty much say any vulnerable road user crash is going to be definitely a 4. I mean, you can see all of that. So then you've got some numbers there. Now, I've done that intentionally quickly to, give you a score. You justify it all. You think about it. I've conjured up some scenario, hypothetical scenario here that has, but often you're in complex urban environments and you're trying to nut this out. So then what you do is I'm just going to clear up a few things here, give us some space. Then what you do is you multiply, and I already mentioned this. You multiply down. And so you go 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16. So, yes. So we've got 2 times 3 is 6, and so we've got 18, and so on and so on. And what you then do is add along the bottom, and you just final score out of 400 and out of 448. That's what I'm trying to write. Although I'm going to get a bigger slide for this, Kathy. I always end up. So you get a final score out of 448. And there you go. That's how you do it. So I'll just sort of walk you through a bit of an example here and show you some matrices that, again, they're sort of adapted. They're not full matrices, but it's giving you more of an idea. So here's an intersection. Let's give way controlled. There's a plan here. It's got a roundabout they're thinking about. Could we do a roundabout there? Could we signalize this intersection with a modified T? Could we signalize it with a conventional T intersection and slip lanes? So the first thing you do is you look at that existing conditions. Put the designs aside for now, and you fill out your matrix. Dot point, dot point, dot point, dot points, dot points. And then, you know, scores, scores, scores. Here's an interesting one. What did I just say about decimal points? Well, Victoria and South Australia said, if you must, if you really must, you can go to a 0.5. No more precision than that. And the reality of it is, more often than not, you find yourself at a 0.5 when your assessment team can't agree between a 2 and a 3. I'll just do 2.5. Anyway, so you can see dot points, and it's what factors increase the likelihood of crash and decrease the likelihood of crash. Increase the severity of crash, decrease the severity of crash. And so you plug all of that in there and you get your score. And then what you do is you copy your completed existing conditions matrix and you paste it. And you label it design option. And then roundabout, you can put a symbol if you want. I just do that to make it clear which one we're talking about. And then you re-look at the existing condition. You say, well, what, when they build this roundabout, exactly if they've got it designed, what's going to be removed in terms of risk factors? And what new risk factors might be added, or what things that improve the situation are going to be added? And so you start crossing things out and you start adding things. Crossing things out, adding things, changing scores. If you change a score, you change the color of it. So anything new goes in with a color, anything that's removed gets a strike through, and you produce this matrix. You do it for each of the options you're presented with. So you grab the existing conditions and you paste it again, and you manipulate it. You grab the existing conditions again, you paste it, and you manipulate it. And then what happens is you get these final scores, and you've got the existing conditions, and you can see here for our intersection, we go, well, the existing conditions give us a score of 118.5. Everything that all those 3 designs that they put forward will improve alignment with safe system principles. The roundabout will give us the best alignment with safe system principles, and then the modified T, and then the conventional T. So that's your highest level. Then you get to this, because you've got all those scores now, and you can look at that and you can plug those in and you can get that. So even though our roundabout was shown to have the highest alignment with safe system principles, you still know it's not going to do wonders for bikes there, and that's our highest remaining score. That's a definite risk to look out for. You'd still, you know, think, are there things we can do for that one or that one, or can we do stuff for motorcyclists? Okay, So we've got to the end of scoring, Kathy. And so before I now jump into the final bit, I'll take any questions.
Beautiful. Is the lowest possible score, not including 0, 7?
No. The lowest possible score would be 1. Because you could have 0 across all except for one category where you had an exposure of 1, a likelihood of 1, and a severity of 1. And you multiply 1 by 1 by 1, it gives 1, and then you add up 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and a 1, and you've got a score of 1.
Okay, but if we didn't include 0?
But 0 is included.
Okay.
Like,
no, that's okay. I've thrown you. I've thrown me. David, come back to us with more information on that.
Is that the only question?
Yeah, that's the only question. I think we're doing okay, or we've lost people. Maybe give us a thumbs up if you're still here.
Oh, somebody said.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, okay. Kathy and I talking about safe systems.
Oh, no, there's at least 3 or 4 other people. Yeah.
Kathy and I and David did, it looks like. No, look at them all. Oh, so many thumbs up.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've got to this point where we've got scores, we've got an output here, we've got matrix, and that's useful. That's useful. But one more step is for us to say, hey, here are some ideas how you can get these scores lower. And it doesn't matter if it's the lowest score, so it's a roundabout, or it's others. You suggest alterations to their design or the existing road environment, if that's all you've been given, to make these scores lower. So you can jump into it, hang on a second, and look at that design of the roundabout and say, well, could we add bike facilities around the roundabout, or we do an alternate bike route, or can we put sharrows on the approach to the roundabout, or whatever it is, But the thing is that those different ones that I just spouted off have different safety benefits. And we categorize those. We categorize them into primary or supporting. Now, non-safe system is a categorization, but you wouldn't be recommending things in that because that's going to make things worse or the like. So you're really going to be going either a primary treatment or a supporting treatment. Now, you have to think of these kind of like buckets, not necessarily like, primary and secondary. No, you could have multiple primary treatments that you suggest, or you could have only supporting treatments that you suggest, nothing primary, because you're like pulling things out of those buckets that you suggest. Now, Kathy will show you some examples, but primary treatments are really big, meaty changes that are really going to eliminate the possibility of fatal and serious injury for that particular crash type, or virtually eliminate that. The supporting treatments are things that improve road safety, but we know aren't like big, juicy things that are really going to eliminate that. And so supporting treatments, for example, signs, line marking, sealed shoulders, audio tactile, edge line, clearing hazards from the roadside. We know those things are good and they reduce the chance of crash, but they're not going to eliminate death and serious injury because people still leave the road, they still go beyond cleared areas, they roll over. And so, that's they're supporting treatments. This will probably be one of the most challenging things I think you'll do in your safe system assessment, is try to categorize these. And so really pay attention when Kathy shows you the safe system assessment framework, the point in that has these. Now, there's one more thing in a safe system assessment that can be done. It's done in full safe system assessments, and I'll talk to you about the difference between a full and a rapid in the next session. But it's to sort of dig into the qualitative questions. These are straight out of Austroads as well. And they ask questions about road user, vehicle, post-crash care. So the questions are road users likely to be alert and compliant, and are there factors that might influence this? So, you know, are we talking about a road out in the middle of nowhere, or are we talking about, you know, a very urban environment? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels? Alcohol, drug, speed, road rules? What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? Can enforcement be conducted safely? Are special road users there? So is the entertainment precinct, elderly on-road activities, distraction by environmental factors? So you don't put numbers to these. You just write dot points or thoughts that you've got or things that you've discovered. You know, it's been really wonderful in some safe system assessments to talk to the local highway patrol, you know, to roll out a roll plot of a road upgrade design and say, hey, this is what, you know, I'm looking at, and, you know, do you think you'll be able to conduct enforcement in this area with all this stuff? And they and scratch their head and say, oh, I don't think so. We're not allowed to pull people over if there's things there and this and that. And, you know, you get a really good idea and they come up with ideas on how it can be changed. Yeah, it's pretty exciting sort of part of thinking holistically about our system. Vehicles. This question is a head scratcher often, because what level of alignment is there with the ideals of safer vehicles? You sort of go, what? They're building road upgrades. What does that even mean? The reason that's in there is because this assessment methodology is very versatile, and you can actually go like to a mine site and do a safe system assessment, and you'd look at the vehicles as well. And that's what they're trying to do, or a remote community or something like that. Other factors might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles. Is the heavy vehicle percentage too high? And are they recreational motorcyclists? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles and remove them from the network? Can enforcement of these activities be conducted safely? Vehicle inspections and the like. Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? And then post-crash care. Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? So congestion, access, stopping space. So that's a motorway style question usually, is one where it comes up and actually gives you something interesting and meaty. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? Do other road users, emergency response teams, are they protected during a crash event? Are drivers provided correct information on the approach or adjacent to an incident? Is there reliable information via BMS? And again, another very sort of big picture one, is there provision for e-safety? So that's, you know, cooperative ITS, intelligent communication systems and the like. So again, mine sites, you know, tunnels, you know, this sort of stuff comes up a little bit. So they're all there. They're used in some safe system assessments. They can provide insights. So a safe system assessment report, there's a list of things that should be in it, but a couple of governments have made your life easy because they've just produced a template, and we're going to give you the template, and it covers the headings and, you know, what you should fill out. So you've got to win there. And that's what we're going to get you to do. And Kathy will shortly bring this up, but I'll just give you a little bit of a briefing. So you're going to be given a site near your house or your office or whatever address you gave us. It's going to have a design. So you're going to look at the existing conditions. Then you're going to look at the design. You're going to score the existing conditions. You're going to score the design. You're going to fill out the matrix. You're going to fill out the report, and you're going to submit that. You're going to go to a site. Now, we have selected the sites and ensured that we're not sending you somewhere highly dangerous. So you're not going to get to, you're not going to be looking at a motorway or a very high speed road or the like. Or there's be areas where you can park safely, not be near live traffic. We want you to wear a high vis vest, or we require you to wear a high vis vest to stay off the road. So this is you definitely don't need to be measuring lane widths or anything like that. You can stand back, just look at how it operates, where people are going, what the general road users are doing, how this design might tie in to the existing area. Don't be a hazard yourself, so don't make people sort of walk around you on the road to get around you, and don't park in a position that blocks sight lines to crossings or anything like that. And we have a safe work method statement in the learning management system, which Kathy will show you, that requires you to just read it and agree. And it's pretty simple stuff, like you're not going to go out there intoxicated, and you understand that while we've risk assessed the sites and made them low risk, you still have a responsibility to act appropriately, and that sort of stuff. So I'll take questions and then hand it over to you, Kathy, I suppose.
Thank you, Ken. There aren't any questions at the minute, but now is your chance to send some questions in, just while I work out where I'm at.
Yeah, we can see your screen now, Kathy.
Okay, terrific. So there's a few things for show and tell. So first thing is the module 4. This is where your the safe work method statement is that Ken mentioned. That's the document in there. Your agreement is just a tick that you agree that you will you've read that and you will head out on site in a safe manner. And then you jump into complete your safe system assessment. So your template is up here, and your design with your surname is here. So you find your name and that's your design. Now, something just to clarify is that we're not looking for you to come up with a design. We've already given you a design. So you've got your existing conditions that you go out and do the site visit on, and then you have a look at the design that we've given you. And then we open up the template. As Ken mentioned, you just do the highlighted section. So this is the Victorian one. I might have mentioned the highlighted sections there a bit. We don't ask you to do an executive summary. Anything that's crossed out, you can politely ignore. So you pop in your name here on your report, who was in the assessment team. Now, if you have a friend or colleague that has the same site as you, which you may do, you may complete the task together as a team and then pop both names in here and submit each of you submit your assignments. Now, again, if you're having any trouble, like I believe the issue with the submitting through the learning management system may have something to do with a firewall. That's what I've been told. So if you're having any trouble uploading them, just email them through to me and I'll do it on this end, or solve the firewall problem in New South Wales, but whatever works. So here you provide a quick little summary, just a couple of sentences on what are the proposed works, and you replace this picture here with a snip of your site. And so your site will have this information on there as well. And this is for training purposes only. So sometimes there might be real sites, and sometimes there might be sites generated by our magic site generator machine. So this is a training purposes exercise. So it may not necessarily be real. You need to tell us what the speed limit is. So pop that in there. So again, anywhere you see anything highlighted. And then we'll jump back to the assessment summary. So once you have actually scored it and you've done your matrix, then you pop in your final scores, for one for existing conditions and one for the design option. And you create a graph. We've given you a graph generating tool as well. Okay, so this is our first matrix here, and this is the one that you pop in here, existing conditions. So this highlighted section here, which says insert option, existing conditions, design option 1, and so on, you pop in here, existing conditions. You go out and do your site visit, and you fill this out based on the existing conditions. So we've given you some data on your design that says this is what the AADT is, and so you score it for existing conditions. Now, it looks a little bit different to the one that Ken showed in the example, and this is just so we can see existing conditions, the score here. You don't need to complete the design part, even though it is highlighted. I'll just show you. Here is an example one, okay? So this is one here's one we prepared earlier for you. So here's an example. You pop in your exposure comments and you pop in your scores for each of those in this one up here, and so on and so forth, the likelihood and severity. And then you multiply down. There's this helpful reminder here, multiply down and add across, and then you get your existing conditions score. Again, if you're not quite sure, can't remember, whatever the case may be, jump in and have a look at the example, and you can delete that example once you're done. But this one's really just showing you one that's already been completed. Then what you do, so you've filled all this in, you copy your table once it's all completed. So you, bless. Sorry, just one moment. There we go. So you've completed your table, you copy it. You have many goes at copying it. And then what you do is you paste it. Let's pretend I've pasted it. And then what I start to do is call it the design option 1. And we're only giving you one design option. You can see we've put a picture here of what the design option is. And then what you do is you go through and cross out anything that has changed because of that design. So anything that has changed, that isn't relevant anymore, you cross out. Anything that's new, you put in red. So you add your new comments in red. And if your score has changed, you put your design score in there and you put it in red as well. If it hasn't changed, you just leave it the same. You multiply down, add across, and then you pop in your design score. How are we traveling with questions here, Ken?
There are some questions. So people want to know if there's a spreadsheet or it's all done in Word. So that's good. I think you're about to show us a little spreadsheet to get that graph made up. But you do have to put everything into the Word document with your justification and the like. But then you'll see there, Kathy has a magical spreadsheet, which is it coming up? There it is.
There it is.
And you can put some scores in. You probably want to enable editing, but that's all right.
Thanks, Ken.
And you can put some scores in, and then it'll just magically produce you a little graph. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you would easily have been able to whip something up in Excel, but, you know, just trying to make your life a little bit easier there. A little bit of discussion about why everybody's just going to the one intersection in Grafton. And it's because we happen to have a design for that intersection and we haven't designed up another one. What else have we got here? There was another good question in there. So assessing is only for signposted speed limit and not plus 10 kilometers per hour. That's typically used for design option, etc. Well, we should clarify there. The only reason you are
sorry, go on. Yep.
No, sorry, I'm just clarifying this one. You are assessing on what you believe the operating speed of vehicles will be, okay, under the existing and the new. So maybe if you had speed data for the area, that would be very helpful for at least the existing conditions, but you've got to predict it for the future. So you kind of put those design rigid specifics out of your mind because you're talking about real world operation. And, you know, those design speeds that we come up with are to help us calculate sight distances and taper lengths and those sort of things, which is all important. But then, yeah, as an assessor, just go in with what you think it might be. Hopefully that clarifies that a bit.
Thanks, Ken. So we've hit the next stage once we've done this here. And this is where Ken talked about the primary treatments and supporting treatments. So what can we do now to improve safe system alignment of this particular design? So this is where you get to make some suggestions, and where you can have a look for some prompts here is in the resources section. There's the, we're looking for the safe system assessment framework. And it looks like this. And what you do is you can skip past all of that. I wonder if it tells you actually how they worked out those different exposure categories. Does it, Ken? No. Okay. There's some information in here about the scoring, 1, 2, 3, 4 that we went through. And here we go here. Beautiful. So we've got our different crash types, and we've got primary treatments and supporting treatments. Now they liked a little bit of a rainbow scenario here, but the yellow and the orange here, these two are all supporting treatments. And they actually tell you what they influence as well over here, if it's exposure, likelihood, or severity. So there's some thought starters there in terms of what are some things that you can do to help improve alignment. It's not the exhaustive list, but it's definitely something to get you thinking. And there's one of these for each one. So head on, intersection. Is there another? There's another. Amazing. Pedestrian, cyclist, and motorcyclist. So that is in the resources section, and it's the safe system assessment framework. Don't limit yourself just to that particular resource. Go nuts, read all of them. But that's what will help you in completing this section here. So what treatments might we consider that are primary treatments and that are supporting treatments? And you don't need to complete the project response. And I think, oh no, that's right, I forgot about this. Replace Ken with you. We need new Kens. So you need to take a selfie of you at the site with all the signs or whatever it is and pop it in here. Make sure you've got your high-vis vest on, and it's just to ensure that you did actually get out there and do a site visit and you didn't do it via Street View or whatever. So pop yourself in there, and then right back up to the beginning. So there's that bit where you pop your Excel, you pop in your scores in there for existing conditions and the design option. How are we going? Did I cover it all, Ken?
I think you did well, Kathy. I just want to reiterate a couple of common things that people lose marks for. So it's a good way to help people do better is say what people commonly get wrong. There's some people aren't quite clear that we are looking for recommendations to improve the design. Okay, you're not coming up. So some people get into like some weird space of categorizing the parts of the design into primary and supporting. No. You've looked at the design. Okay, now you're coming up with new things, additions, changes, and you've got to categorize those changes. That makes sense? So if there's a roundabout going into an intersection, you don't write roundabout in this recommendations because that's what they're planning, right? You're saying add, raised crossings at the roundabout, add lighting, put barriers around this bit, change this bit, additions, changes, alterations. So that's one thing people get wrong. Yeah, second one is not to give us a selfie to prove that you went to the site. And another one is they give us a selfie and they're not wearing their high-vis vest, which we get very annoyed at because we said you wear a high-vis vest when you're on site. Another one is to not put enough information in the matrix. You can see there's a bit of information. If we just have like one word in each likelihood, shoulders and speed, it's not enough information. You'll lose marks. It's got to be fleshed out enough for us to be confident you looked at it, you thought through lots of stuff. So that's another one.
Just showing you there's an example, another one, even though we've got a couple of example matrices tables in there, there is a complete example SSA report. And if you do search the internet for safe system assessment reports, you will find them as well. So that's in there for you as well. I think is having a MO mandatory. Oh, Brad, I like your thinking, and I can probably send you a fake moustache, actually. I've always got one hanging around. Anyway, no, I don't right now. You can be Mo-less. You're going to grow one especially. Okay, great. So the due date, because it should give you enough time, Brad, to grow your Mo in time, is in 2 weeks' time. So basically, we will come back together again next Thursday, and that's a really good opportunity for you to get out, do the site visit, do your initial existing conditions matrix, and then come back with any questions or, I didn't understand this, or how does this work, and so on. Everyone's just on a Mo growing frenzy now. Anyway, and grow your Mo's. That's what you've got to do in the next 2 weeks. It's almost November, so Ken will sponsor you. So there you go.
I will. Yeah. Yeah.
And then what? So the idea of next session is that we come back together. There's an opportunity for questions in there, and then you have another week after that to submit your assignment. And we'll mark it. So Ken or one of his other moustached colleagues will mark it and give you some feedback. And also, if we haven't jumped in and finished marking your assignment from the first time round, we'll get that sorted in the next day or so.
If you go out on site and a member of the community comes out to ask what's being planned, can you just say that you're on a training exercise and not show them the plans and the like? Because some of them, as we said, have been designed specifically for the exercise, and you just don't want to cause trouble.
All complaints to can be out too. And if you do get out there and all you remember from this conversation is about growing your moustache or not growing your moustache, and most of the rest of the other information is bypassed you, just get in touch with us. We love emails and phone calls to talk all things safe system assessments. And I think that's it. You think they'll believe us? Just seriously, it can be at safesystemsolutions.com.au.
Let's give them 14 minutes to get started.
Yes. And there is a quiz. There's a quiz too. Sorry,
quiz?
Lots of work. Yeah, I think so. Pretty sure. Oh, yeah, Wally. Oh, I needed to give a Wally. Yeah. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute whilst I give a Wally hint.
Wally hint?
No. It's a Wally. Yeah, we're thinking about making. How bad am I at lying?
Wally, Wall Brooks is our Wally.
Oh, is he? Has he given a Wally hint already?
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, okay. All right. What's he going with? Oh, can I ask who did the design layout for Macquarie Street? And okay, yep, Paul, you can. So just as a Wally hint, you have to look at the screen for the Wally hint. Now, some of the designs are real, as we mentioned, and some are made up. So if I jump back into,
Yes.
so don't be too concerned about it. And if you think it's a rubbish design, I think that's okay, isn't it, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because sometimes it can be. And sometimes, yes, there may. So maybe let's just have a quick look at Paul.
So, yeah, it was created for you.
It was
specifically, Paul.
Yeah, that's a Paul special right there. So we're just having a quick look at Paul's here. Yeah, so I think that was one that was designed up for you. Training exercise is what the key word is. This is a training exercise. We may not have, and so yeah, may not be real. Don't get too distressed, and yeah, don't share it with members of the public and cause complaints. Can be.
Paul's got a little background on the intersection, it looks like. That can be an advantage. Can be a disadvantage sometimes too. No, it doesn't matter. Okay, I think people want to get into it, Kathy, but
absolutely.
If you've got any questions, if you want a bit of one-on-one coaching, we can definitely do that if you're really struggling with bleeding this. If you have any technical difficulties, get in contact with Kathy. If you want mow growing tips, you can talk to me. I will see you in a week's time, actually.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks very much. Bye.